So it's been brought to my attention fairly recently that there are already a large number of conspiracy theories out there about the Sandy Hook Elementary School massacre. Um, yeah, I really don't know what to say about people that genuinely believe these things to be true. It's one of those things where I think it kind of goes beyond the typical, JFK assassination, 9/11. I want to be a part of some fringe knowledge base, which is what I think is behind most conspiracy theories. If you look at it from a psychosocial angle, most people that are really, really hardcore into conspiracy theories are people that are largely marginalized in culture. These are people that, generally don't feel as if they have a voice, or they're kind of ostracized from society in general. So they take refuge in the fact that there are these overarching, gigantic schemes in place which explain why all these things secretly happen. And because they know, or they claim to know, that gives them something of a specific knowledge that empowers them compared to the average citizenry. But when I read these Newtown conspiracy theories, there are two things that become quite apparent to me. Number one, the people that believe these things, I think by and large, are the same kind of people that are buying into the whole grand Illuminati and New World Order. There's a massive governmental conspiracy with some shadowy organization to overthrow us and destroy freedom and democracy and our rights and rip up the Constitution. If you ever listen to Alex Jones, you've heard this a million times before. That seems to me to be the average constituency of the Sandy Hook truthers, I suppose. That's one of the commonalities. The other commonality is that they all seem to have an absolute extreme hatred and fear of the Obama administration. And they are genuinely convinced that the Sandy Hook shooting was a false flag operation, which would allow the government to confiscate weapons, and from there, you can read, on your own what they think's going to happen. That, we're going to be enslaved and the government's going to run us over like in Nazi Germany. Well, anyway, that's what people believe. And, it seems almost comical at first until you realize, no, there are people out there that feel extremely strongly about this, as in radically. And to make things worse, when you look at the people that are into this, and you can go on any, the extremist websites, you can go on Stormfront, you can go on all these, radical, white nationalists and Christian separatist sites, and they all believe this stuff. I mean, that's part of their cultural milieu, that these things are false flag operations, and the government is killing its own people to further this agenda. And this is very, very frightening to me. Basically for the reason I said before, because, and I'm not saying that everyone that believes that Sandy Hook was a cover-up or a conspiracy, I'm not saying that everyone that believes that is a radical fundamentalist. But I'm going to also say that there are a sizable number of them which are. And like I said, you can go into any of these radical, forums. You can go to the white nationalist forums. You can go to the Christian separatist. You can go to the Christian identity. All organizations, a lot of the Patriot movements, the sovereign movements. These are all, organizations that are categorized by the Southern Poverty Law Center as hate groups. These are people that, are not exactly, benign people. And if you've ever read some of the really important, agitprop from their culture, if you've read things like the Turner Diaries or Unforeseen Consequences, you know that they have an almost apocalyptic biblical belief that the government will eventually try to take away firearms, and that will lead to something called a RAHOA, which is basically like this gigantic confrontation between the citizenry and the federal people. And it's very frightening things to consider, that there are a large number of people, maybe some of them in positions of power, like sheriffs, maybe doctors, maybe people that aren't just, your average kooky, college students or, guys hanging out in military surplus stores. I mean, there are actual people that have social clout that believe that what happened in Connecticut was a government ploy to take away firearms. I don't really have a comment for that. But there are people that I think have so much hostility. They have so much hatred directed, particularly towards the current administration, that I think that it could only be a matter of time before we start seeing these people go from radical ideologists to actual on-the-street extremists. And I take stuff like this seriously. When I read this, I'm not laughing. I'm saying to myself, this is a warning sign. These people, they're in their little web blogs now. They're chatting it up in forums. But what happens? How long before, they start taking out energy grids? Like it says in the Turner Diaries, or Unforeseen Consequences, which if you haven't looked them up, you need to. Because these things are basically, they're like the Gospels to extremists, to the American extremists. In fact, Timothy McVeigh called the Turner Diaries his Old Testament and Unforeseen Consequences his New Testament. And these are not, just fictitious books. These are things that are basically manuals, like insurgency plans for white nationalists and Christian identity people. So it's there. This stuff is not, dormant. It's available. You can read it. And I think what we're seeing with Sandy Hook now is just, to me, one of the most blood-curdling social phenomenon that I've encountered in a long time. And for all you people that actually do believe Sandy Hook was a government cover-up, that is a conspiracy, and it's a giant ploy, just remember, eventually you're going to have to assimilate in normal society. One day you're going to have to get a job. You're going to have to face reality. And stuff like this, I'm sorry, but it's just unacceptable. The fact that you had these kids die, these parents grieve, and this is what you're doing to promote your own crazy agenda based on the loosest, most incoherent non-evidence you have. If that's something you are willing to do, then I'm really genuinely frightened about how far you would take this. And I think it's a more important issue than you're probably going to hear in the media. And I think at the end of the day, these guys, they might just be a little bit more dangerous than just kooks. So there you go. They're there. They're there.